This week's episode of On Their Terms is a little bit of a different one. I speak with Mathieu Hutin, a good friend of mine, and we speak about his transition from closing billion-dollar deals, billion with a B, in investment banking, and how he threw all of that away, how he moved to the other side of the world where he knew no one, on a pursuit of not only what life on his terms looks like, but what life authentically true to himself, what that version of himself looks like, how he went on the journey to discover that. And this episode is particularly important to those who are considering going through some major life changes, or just anyone who's seeking personal growth and inspiration. So the premise of the podcast is just life on your terms. And I think you have a really interesting story on how you got here, everything that you've done, the different versions of you that you've gone through. So why don't we actually start there?
Yeah,
Walk through,
yeah, we could do
I
that. Yeah,
suppose,
for
younger
sure.
life, going through banking, everything like that.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot there because there's a lot of different versions of me. Well, there's one version that it happens to most of us. But there's the first version that was the most impacted by what do you want, like your upbringing, your society, where you start adapting to becoming the person that your parents and your society wants you to become, right? And this is what I did for a very long time. Because as a child and everything, I was very different. I was like a dreamer. I was not really prepared for the career that I just embarked on, and then then you want to start you want to start satisfying your surrounding, your parent, mostly your parents. I think that's probably the biggest impact. But then it's spilled over into the rest of my life, where it became very apparent to look successful, to be successful, to represent a certain things, and then somehow you get lost in the sense that you don't even realize you are in an act, so to speak, right? You're acting a life that is apparently looking fine, amazing. You have everything that everybody else dreams about. You achieve the things others want to achieve. And it came to a breaking point for me where I actually, the version of who I had become and who I actually am was so far apart that I didn't understand what I was doing. So it took quite a while to achieve that. It took quite a while. It took, so from start to banking, but that's not the start of everything going in a different direction. But it took probably 14, 15 years to the breaking point. That's what most people call a midlife crisis, by the way.
So if we, just for reference, so
Yeah.
you left school, and did you go straight into banking, or was there something else before that?
No, I went straight to banking. I actually started before I actually finished off my university. I actually I rushed out of university as fast. So I closed my university, but we were supposed to do a last internship, and I already had started the banking world. I went to the top universities I could in Europe, and then from there into the banking world, which honestly was an amazing experience in terms of the discipline, the precision, the teamwork required, attention to details, the focus. That part was amazing because you had to perform. You had to be always at the best, and that was very formative. It was very that was interesting, and a lot of people start and actually after a year or two get out because it's
As in, are you
not
saying
for
they start
everyone.
university and they get out, or are you saying they start
No,
banking and
no,
get
you
out?
start the banking world. You start the banking world, and then you just leave it after a year or two because it's very demanding in terms of the sacrifices as well you have to make. It's fun, but you work nonstop. So if you wanted to have a private life, it's a bit more complicated because your private life is still in the office somewhere. Um,
So
but
if we
what I
can just
love,
break down
yeah,
banking for a second, we'll get back to what you love in
yeah,
just a
yeah,
second.
sure, sure.
So when you say you went into banking, uh, when most people say that we've got pictures of Wolf
Yeah.
of Wall Street, people, on phones shouting and screaming and everything like that. But when you say you got into banking, what does that actually look like?
Yes, I went to that part. I went to the investment banking world. So it was in 2000, 2001. So when I initially did an internship a year earlier at that bank, Credit Suisse. It was actually Credit Suisse First Boston at the time. And I did an internship. I didn't really know what I was going to expect. I was trying to get a foot in the door, just see what this would be. And I ended up in what's called capital markets and fixed income. So it's everything which is bonds, government bonds, interest rates, foreign exchange, what we call credits or corporate bonds, and all the derivatives products attached to that. Derivatives products are like synthetic. Make it simple, synthetic version of a physical product, so to speak, right? And so I did an internship there for 3 months, which was eye-opening because I realized then that this is the career I wanted. When you work in a corporate world, more traditional corporate world, there's a lot of hierarchy. And in the investment banking world, this was very flat in terms of hierarchy. The boss was sitting next to us. Everybody was still making deals. And the beauty of this industry for me was it's performance driven. So the more you work, the more you succeed, the more you get paid, and you can get paid almost as much as your boss if you worked hard and well. And there was no real typical corporate ladder to go up with.
Mm,
That was the appealing part. No, there was like no real ceilings.
mm,
So it's like having a massive option to be successful if you actually dedicated the time and the attention to it.
mm. So you didn't
And
have to worry about playing those corporate games per se. It
no,
was
you
just
did
how
have
do I
to.
you did?
That's ultimately where I failed at the end of my career. I was known to be a problem shooter and a deal maker. I was not very good at politics, and it's still not my strong. Right, I'm at the top of my career. I was the right hand to the head of Europe for sales. So he had the vision. I was executing, but I was not very good at being politically correct. I'm still not very good at it. I'm very blunt sometimes, and but you give me an objective, and I go for it. So I was not very good at political game, which needs to be played, and that's where I hit a very natural ceiling in my career. It's
Mm,
because for the last step to manage a team and become like a managing director, you have to be good at politics. And that wasn't me. I was a
mm,
deal maker. I was not the guy who was like slick and like knowing how to play the people. No, I was just like, no, I was not good at this.
mm, mm.
I was more running down deals and looking for other deals and deals and deals. Yeah,
So how did
not.
that look like? What are some of the deals that obviously you can't name names, but what are
No,
some
I
of the
can talk
deals
about
that
them
you
now.
were in and what it looked like?
Yeah, so very early on, I will always remember one of the first days when I arrived. So you get like you have like your desk, your colleagues are right next to you everywhere. We were like 600 people on one open space, and there's no privacy. Everybody's next to each other. Two phones, dealer board in front of us, and literally I was jumped in and my colleagues were next to me and I had to just figure it out. There was not a lot of education. You had to figure it out, and then after you help the guys around you on their deals initially. But very early on, I was actually, because the team was understaffed, I was given clients on small transactions. um, small transaction with lower risk, but small still meant like $5-6 million. So it was still in terms of volume, nominal amount, still
Those are the smaller
relatively big.
deals.
No,
Five to
there were
six
small
million is
deals.
small.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
five. They were small, and I figured it out. I love to just figure it out, right? So very quickly, I started making money for the firm, and not huge amounts, but like I always it was like productive. So you start getting allocated more and more clients, and then you find the deals are, well, there's lots of different deals, and the beauty of what I did is I never stopped. I was given an objective which was mostly interest rate derivatives products, but I actually had traded every single product available on a trading floor. I don't think there's a single product I haven't had a chance to put my hands on. So we would get a new trader which had a new positions. I would work with them, find a way to place it somewhere within my clients. Transactions, you have different types. You have faster transaction. We called flow products, which were interest rate swaps. So that's faster. That's like either proprietary positioning by a bank or a hedge, and that can be, those transactions can be like a minute and a half. So the client calls you, they tell you what they want to do. You talk in a short jargon, and I price the product, the trader price the products, we give a price, and you hit on the price, and the deal is done. Now, it sounds like order taking. Some of it was, but a lot of it was also reading through the lines of the client. Right? Are we the only one on in competition? Do I have last look? How much can I actually influence the price a little bit? So there's little tweaks you could do, and those tweaks meant a lot of money for us. That's the big thing, right? That's where the difference was made, because if you knew, for example, that the transaction was relatively large and we're not the only one in the market, you would want to pass on that, because otherwise the trader could potentially have a large position he can't get out of. And so lots of little things that you could tweak always. And more complex trades, which take a bit more time to create. They're more balance sheet oriented. So you're trying to just mitigate risks that they build over time on their balance sheets. These trades usually you do a bit later in your career, when, let's say, you understood the basics and the fundamentals. But those were we called it elephant hunting. They were fun, because these were deals that you could make, like, for the firm, many millions in profits for them. So those were, yeah, even though I love those, the stress about those is you needed one in your year was almost made. But if you didn't have any, you would have a very bad year. So you would have to look within the client, ask the questions to identify problems, and start finding interesting solutions to those. And done a few
How
of
did you
those, which
do that
are like
though?
really
With
nice.
600 people on the same floor though. 600 people
Yeah,
that for me just sounds overwhelming. How do
yeah.
you go about actually conducting yourself in that kind of environment? What was it like?
Wow, that's a good question. That came very natural to me. This is where, for me, the Zoom is more difficult, because you put me in 600 people, I actually have no problem with that. You network, you shake hands, you trade, you have to be not scared to just go over to a desk, someone you don't know, sit down, try to understand what they're doing. So a lot of it came down to just being very curious, and it's a jungle finding your way through, because everybody's short time, everybody's short patience. So nobody had time to educate you and spend like time explaining, oh, this is what I'm doing. So you had to just feed off lots of little bit of information.
Mm,
I'm on my good days, I'm lots of fun and whatnot. So I used a lot of that to spend time with as many people I could on the trading floor, and meet as many different divisions, and trading with them was very useful. Trading with them, like understanding the product, and try to place even the smallest possible ones into prospects or
mm.
clients. But conducting yourself, I don't know. I never had. I was never scared of hierarchy, so I was walking in any person, any. I was never scared of asking people what they were doing, even if it's the head of Europe, and challenging them, and them me in return. So that came fairly naturally.
Mm.
That came fairly naturally, and I had to, because when I switched banks afterwards, I moved bank after 6 years from Credit Suisse to Merrill Lynch, and I was hired to become a product specialist for the entire Europe and Middle East. So now I had to interact. I had another layer of complication that I had to work with salespeople to bring them to show me their clients. So not only did I had to work with clients and sell the client, and I had to sell the sales guy. It was in his best interest to open his portfolio of clients to me,
Why was it in his best interest?
because I would close deals that he couldn't. And that's where the ego came in the way, right?
As in, you're going to close better with his clients than he can.
Yes, and I did,
Mm.
but that was my mandate as well. That's why I was the head of Europe had hired me, and he said, like, you're going to be a walking suitcase. I want you to find deals. The only objective you have is find deals wherever they are. So that's spending time. Part of it is working with other colleagues, and making them making myself non-threatening. That was key, so that they would see that there was, like, actually a benefit in having me in the conversation. And
Mm.
usually once I found one or two that had a good experience, it was easy then afterwards, because then we made money. And then once you have one or two guys who said, like, no, we just closed a few deals, then it became easier to go and see more and more clients.
Mm.
But it was a jungle. It's even worse, because there's so many things you have to do. Then the politics were tough. At Merrill's, the politics were really tough. They just
Mm.
banks were famous for hiring other bankers from other banks as well. So when I came to Merrill's, they just had hired half the team from JP Morgan at the time. So we had a culture clash. There was a JP Morgan clique versus the ex Merrill Lynch guys. So it was like egos between one team not liking the other, etc., etc.
Mm. I
Stressful.
so side note, I was brought into a sales team. This is when I was a lot younger. This is the step into corporate, and they brought me in to sell
Mm.
software because none of the company sold photocopiers at the time, and they had analysts who had created all of this really clever software, and the photocopier guys were like, nah, we know what we're good at, we're going to stick to it. So they brought me in, and they're just like, yeah, you can go into their territories, you can work with them, they're going to bring you in on deals. No, there was only one guy that gave me the time of day, and I hit the position of, well, I can either try and force it in and like force the conversations and everything like that, um, or I can work with this one guy and in essentially unmapped out territories, and sooner or later they will come. They will absolutely come around, and they did. It only took a few months, and they realized that I was putting way more profit in any of the deals that they had, and they're like, oh, maybe you can come out and have a chat to some of my clients. But playing that game of egos amongst even beginner salespeople, not
Uh,
to mention the long-standing guys, it's a battle.
it's about, yeah, of course, you have to make them see that it's in their best interest to work with you,
Mm,
and you have to be non-threatening.
mm,
Another way, we had within the industry, we had, like, so we had the derivatives people, which were like the more complex derivatives, like the more complex structures. And then we had what we called the flow products, which were the good old guys doing government bond sales, which is a little easier, a little easier in terms of nothing is easier, right? But in transaction, it was like,
mm,
but I realized that these guys, which when we were in the fame of derivatives, and we were the rock stars of derivatives, they felt undervalued. But what I had realized that they had much better connections within the clients, and when I started working as a product specialist, I went to them first. I never made them feel like belittled or that they didn't have a great product or whatnot. And having worked with these older guys, which were doing flow products, had good connections within their clients, starting to work with them and making big deals with them triggered the other guys to actually want to do it too.
Mm.
But the easier one was that way, and not going the normal route,
Mm.
which would have been used my colleagues, which are already derivatives experts. There, we had like it was initially more difficult,
Mm.
but
So you said before that it took you 15 years. So were you in banking for 15 years?
no, I did banking for 10 and a half, 10, around 10, yeah, 10 years. But
Mm.
during my studies, I was already driven. That's where everything had really started. I
Mm.
already had done different. When I got the taste of work, like corporate work, that's when I my ego kicked in and I'm like, this is what I want, right? My first internship was at Anderson Consulting. At the time, it doesn't exist. By the way, we're going to get to that, but I have a fame for all the corporates I worked for are now gone. I went for Anderson Consulting. Credit Suisse is gone. Merrill Lynch is gone. I worked for L'Oréal. They're still there. But I love the work. I love this type of work. The study part was not natural to me. It's interesting, but I like more action. I like to get things done. And when you study, it's intellectual, but you don't really get things done. Whereas like when you work in a corporate, yeah, you were getting things done. Oh, it sells like what we do. Like you can see your results. You can see things are moving, right?
Mm.
Yeah. But then at the end of 10 years to come back, yeah, there was a moment where things didn't make too much sense. Um, Thinking back at this as well, I had the wrong objectives, to be honest with you. I wanted a certain title, you know, and ranks within in the banks, and I had reached this one very early on in my career. I think after 5 years, I already had the title I wanted, which was director. And I stayed director for another 5 years because the last step was managing director. But when you set yourself a goal which is not meaningful, but is just like an objective, you when you reach it, then you have the moment. Now what? And that's kind of also what happened. I had reached those goals, and I was like, "Now what? I'm not happier. I'm not more fulfilled. I kind of only reached a goal, but I didn't know why I had set that goal to start with."
So on that as well, what you told me this once before, you were in
Yeah,
some pretty big deals. So what
yeah.
was potentially the biggest or maybe the usual kind of deals that you were closing?
Right. So, wow. Okay. Big deals. Big deals. So, in terms of volume, I worked on a few $1 billion transactions. Um, that's big. Now you have to distinguish between flow product and structured. But on the structured product, we placed that was still at Merrill's when we placed a structured derivatives product. I think it was 1.2 billion euros was placed, and we were three to do that, using the sales team, obviously, but like going on meetings and everything. And then when I went back to Credit Suisse, for example, I sold about 500 to 600 million. I don't remember, like around $500 million of a algorithmic foreign exchange strategy in a few months.
But when you actually close those deals,
Yeah,
well, like you said before, when you get the title, you think that that's going to be the be all and end all. And when you close a deal like that, a lot of people will say that the anticipation of closing that deal is a lot more fulfilling than the closing itself. You kind of do it and it's like, and that was okay, that's it, next. Was that what you've experienced?
initially there was a massive kicking doing it, right? But like
Mm.
as time went on, it kind of became a little bit more of a yeah, non-event. Um, yeah, a little bit, yeah, indeed.
Mm.
I remember the first few years, any deal you closed, you were thrilled, and pumped with adrenaline, and everything was like rushing through your body at the time you were doing these closes. And then at the end, it was like, yeah, what's next? And this is where these more exotic deals, like doing balance sheet things that I did at one stage, were more fulfilling. The execution is less interesting, but the deal itself, the complexity was more interesting. So that was like an Italian bank. We hedged their portfolio over a few weeks, but I was the only one in the market knowing about it, and we closed large volumes over a very liquid time period. These are deals which are like really fulfilling. But all of this became pointless around 2008, 9, when the market tanked, and I realized that, funny enough, even my clients didn't really care if the market tanked, and I told them to hedge certain products and take certain position to protect the portfolios, and you realize on the other side, even though they could, and they knew they could avoid certain losses, they didn't want to, because they just had to follow a certain protocol, and it was more risky for them to just break the protocol and protect potential investments rather than just follow protocol. And that was like, this is where I lost a little bit of faith in the entire industry at that time, because I was like, if I could have helped many clients save millions to small their clients. They didn't want to. Right? Their strategy was like, if the market tanks 40% and I tank 38, I outperformed by 2%. And I was like, yeah, but I can make you save potentially 30% of the loss. And I'm like, no, we just need to just make sure we lose a little bit less than the benchmark. So everything was like, so yes, that was not very fulfilling. So that part became a little difficult. Then chasing money per se was not very fulfilling neither. And I always wondered, what would I do with my life? There must be a life outside of banking, right? You do this for like 12, 13 hours a day, nonstop. The funny part is you start doubting that there's a life out there, that you can do something else. And you become a prisoner of your luxury, of your lifestyle. You become a prisoner of your job because you're hyper specialized, and you think nobody else will hire me. So that's where I felt I was a little tied in. I lost a lot of freedom, and I didn't like that feeling of losing freedom of my life. And this is where I started the breaking away from all that beautiful world, and went completely the other way. Well, like completely. One extreme attracts the other extreme, right? So neither is very healthy. But that's where the second part of my journey started, at the age of 30. Was that 33, maybe? 30, 33, 34. You could argue that I've had an early midlife crisis. Luckily enough, I didn't replace, the classic, the wife and the car. You get a younger wife and a red sports car. But I went into a little bit more of a introspective journey afterwards. And that's where the meaning comes in, right? Instead of going for like shiny objects, I went for a little bit more meaningful journey, a little bit more of a meaningful lifestyle, so to speak.
All right, let's talk about that transition.
Yeah.
Because this is something that you see across very successful people that have made a lot of money, people that have ticked all of those boxes, whether that be in your 30s or 40s, sometimes earlier, but you were very early, in your 30s.
Yeah.
How did you feel that incongruency with, this is how I'm conducting myself and this is not the version of myself that I want to be? How do you actually come to that decision and say bye to all of that, essentially everything that you've ever dreamed of being or having?
It took a few years. The first signs came, I think, 4 years before I actually quit the job. I started feeling there was something I couldn't understand. I didn't understand it. I just knew something was off.
Mm,
And you add to that health problems that started piling up as well due to excessive stress. So that's another, your body's telling you something as well. By the way, there's a very interesting book on that. Anyway, we'll come to that later on. Actually, how the body tells you that you reach your mental limits as well, right? And you need to listen to the body as much as to the mind. But after the health issues, I continued a few years, and it didn't make sense. Nothing really made sense, and that was the big problem. Is I almost had two lives. There was the version of me that I had pretended to be, this banker, and then there was who I wanted to be.
mm,
A big part of this discovery was me going and traveling during my holidays, always to Latin America, where I am now, by the way. But that was very eye-opening for me because I always loved Latin America. I was always stunned by it because there's so much life. People are very happy, jovial in Latin America, a lot more than in Europe. And every time I went on holidays to Latin America and I backpacked through Latin America, so that's why I already started having this awkward life when I was like the successful banker, and I was backpacking for every single one of my holidays. Like I was living in, like doing Lonely Planets. You probably know that. Like not you were no phones at the time, so you would Lonely Planet around, get like a bus that would take you 15 hours to go to one location, and you
mm,
would arrive in a dark town, and you would have to find your hotel or hostel. Like, so I started doing a lot of that because I needed to reconnect with the simple version of myself.
mm.
And this is how I started having this dual life. There was like part of me which
So
was
is this in your
successful
30s
banker.
or late 20s?
It's in my late 20s, so 29. Yeah, late 20s already.
We had a so I that's when we originally met. I was backpacking through Central and
Yeah.
South. We had a very different experience. I had Hostel World on my phone, but it was interesting. I met a lot of versions of that, people late 20s, early 30s, who have hit that point where who I am back home is not who I want to be, and everyone at home expects me to be a certain way. The solution is come to Central and South America where the world is completely different. No one has those expectations of you. I saw a lot of that. I
Of
was that
course.
person. I was as well. How do you go from that then going back? So you did that multiple times.
Yep. Always short holidays, short trips, and then you go back, and then you have an epiphany for a few weeks, and then you fall back into your routine, and you continue on.
Mm,
Luckily enough, my job was fulfilling, so that was not the problem. But something was off, right? But I
mm,
remember back and forth all the time between the holidays and who I want to be. Then I started having the signs were always there, like obsessions, growing trees, right? So I would spend my weekends looking for seeds and spotting the trees throughout London, which were like Japanese maples, and I would like collect those and grow those trees. And with a neighbor of mine, we would like we grew over like 5,000 trees over 2 years or something like ridiculous. So we had like excessive passions outside of what you're doing, which is like
mm,
basically you're venting nonstop. And I needed the connection with the earth, right? My job, it was very like digital and phones and whatnot, but and I needed to reconnect constantly with nature and had my
mm,
hands in the soil with the seeds, watching the little plants grow. Now it's all logical. At the time, I never really understood what was happening. But I think that you read the science, read what's happening, look at your like the excesses that you have in your life. Where do they come from? It's like one excess attracts another one in the other direction. That was constantly was happening with me, looking for escapes from what I had become. The other thing that helped me a lot is the memories of childhood that I had. Very few from my grandfather, but I remember that my grandparents lived a very normal rural life in northern France. No central heating. You like one stove where you put the charcoal in, and that was heating the entire house during the winter. He had my grandfather, I think, 2 pairs of shoes. He was growing his vegetables and everything, and I always remembered that as a benchmark to how far my life had gone off track. That always kept me somehow centered.
As in, you compared how you conducted yourself or your life looked like for the
Yeah,
level of happiness as opposed to his level of
yeah,
happiness.
exactly. Yeah, how simple life was between my grandparents, then how it switched to my parents, and how mine had become. So you have like this simple rural life. My parents moved into the bigger cities, had a bit more of a lifestyle change, and then came my generation, which had a complete lifestyle change, and the gap in those generations was massive. But I always remembered how you could live very simplistically and very happily. That all the fuzz around this luxurious, successful life, it's just not really the purpose, and this is not really meaningful. This is not of substance, so to speak. So that kept me always a little bit in, I would say, on the right track, so that I didn't completely lose it, knowing where I grew
When
up.
when so if you were doing that, when did you leave London?
I left London. I was 34. I left London very quickly, very abruptly. So what actually happened, and luckily enough, a year before I left. So a lot of the things. Well, it's very personal, but here's the thing: I'd like to thank every single one of my girlfriends that I had, because funny enough, now today again, looking back, everything makes sense. They all gave me as well what I needed. I had a few long-term relationships back then, uh, actually two, but they gave me exactly, for some reason, what I needed, and to grow in my journey. So always I'll be endlessly grateful for those relationships that I had, because I grew a lot from them. They didn't We parted away, but I probably almost certainly would have never become the person I am today if I didn't have had all these different experiences. That for
Mm,
sure. And leaving London was massively inspired by one girlfriend I had. She's in Australia right now, and that helped me. She opened my eyes to Latin America, and this is how I ended up in Latin America years later.
mm,
And I left, because I started doing I needed help. I couldn't do all this by myself, so I needed help, and I reached out to a coach, a mentor. That was in 2000. The first time in 2008. I saw him again in 2010, and this is when we started the more deeper work. It's on Jungian studies based. So it's on traumas, on unconscious, and making the unconscious conscious, in your patterns and everything. We did massive work for 5 months,
mm,
and I actually had taken time off work during that period. And one Friday, I realized that was it. I'm not going back to banking. I
mm,
literally not going back. So I called my boss at the time. We set up a meeting. He said, "Perfect timing. I have a surprise for you." Basically, we meet at breakfast, and he tells me, "You're going to run the team. The job you wanted a year ago, it's yours. I'm leaving. I want you to run the team. You're going to be the head of the structuring team for foreign exchange." And I said to him, like, "That's great. But you're going to be surprised at what I want, because I want out. I'm done." So I told him, like, "Find a way, but I'm out. I'm not coming back." So they tried a little bit to convince me, but my decision was made. My
mm,
decision was made, so I stayed out a few more weeks. Then there was a very short. We had firing rounds, and I was in it. I signed the papers on the 29th of October, and I was in Guatemala on the 3rd of November.
Mm. Did you go
I
straight to Antigua?
I went straight to Antigua. Yeah. I
Yeah.
already had been in Antigua, and I knew it was home from the first time I was here, and that's literally what happened. I just flew straight to Antigua. I didn't know why. That's where I needed to be, and rebuild my life here to on a blank white page to who I wanted to become. Well, as much as I could, basically, because one excess attracts another. That's where the second part of my journey starts, which is different, but it's quite interesting too.
Mm.
Starting with a period of about a year and a half where difficult to believe, but you never met me like this, right? Hippie, long hair, flower
Saw the
pants,
pictures. I saw the
long hair,
pictures.
like long,
Yeah.
seriously long hair.
Yeah.
Right? That was like I needed to just vent, basically.
Yeah.
So that was 2 years or maybe a bit more of my life, and then and then the photography started, the
Mm.
entire documentary and search and that which is the second part, the meaning part of life.
But the
Successful.
first part of life, even though it didn't give you what you needed, I've seen the life that you live. You know, big, beautiful home in a compound in Antigua. Just you live a really nice life. So obviously the banking gave you something,
Yes, it is.
or it gave you
A
a
lot of
segue
things.
to the second part of life, and you had the ability to call it early as opposed to what most people are doing now, stick to it for another 10, 15
Yeah.
years and then just completely explode. So that gave you the opportunity to do the second part of life. So photography, I mean, I've seen all the pictures in your house. I know what it looks like. Uh,
It
and
did.
how did that even happen?
So the first part of life gave me satisfied my ego completely. That's it's the hero's journey as well, right? You have to become a hero, and then you have to crash, and then you have to rebuild.
Mm,
So the luck that I had from my first part of life, that it gave me financial freedom, but more importantly, I never overspent my money. So I actually got freedom. I was never hooked onto a lifestyle. So when I came to Guatemala, I had freedom. I managed to build freedom. And instead of what I was saying, instead of falling to another excess, which is like whatever, like another job and just changes the scenery and maybe the girlfriend, and I started working very deeply on all that psychology during well, still now, right? So the part of this, the beginning of the second journey was an introspective journey into who am I, what do I really want, what are my traumas, and spent 2-3 years just on that,
mm,
really uncovering who I was and what was driving me, right? And because if you don't uncover what drove you during the first part of your life, you're just going to repeat it in a different direction on the second part of your life. So I started that, and photography helped me as well, because instead of looking for success for myself, the photography is oriented towards others nonstop. It was
mm,
never about me, which is funny enough, which is a bit difficult now, because if people want to know what I did and how I did it, I can only show pictures of others. I have not a
mm,
single picture of me taking on my trips, or which is funny because it's bad for marketing. If I needed to show what I've done, people want to see all that, but I never had it because the entire photography was oriented towards others. I was
mm.
fascinating with tribes and Buddhism. So I traveled a lot through Southeast Asia, a lot to Burma, which is traveling back in time. I went there 10 times, 10, 12 times, 1 month each, as much as you can. And the objective was to admire differences, admire simplicity, admire diversity, admire
Mm,
lifestyles which are not mine. Another thing I was trying to uncover is I was trying to find my roots. I was always fascinated by tribes and everything because they're deeply rooted. You might not like the tribe or whatever it is, or visually, but they have they belong to something. They
Mm,
belong to, well, their tribe. They look like their tribe. They
mm,
they have they own a certain land. They're attached to that land. They live with the elements to grow their agriculture and crops on it and everything. And this is exactly what I had not become, right? I had become this rootless, um, no culture, materialistic person. So I had no roots. I don't really know where I belonged. That's why I was so fascinated as well with these tribes, spending so much time trying to understand, document, photograph them, and obsessed getting amazing pictures to
mm,
represent them at their best. That took me years as well to master the art of photographing, like just the techniques properly. That went through a lot of exercises of having crappy pictures, and also being told along the journey that I should give up quite a few times. Quite a few times I came across agents who told me, "You have no chance. You suck at it. You suck.
mm,
So give it up. Focus on." I was good at architecture photography. They told me, "Do this. Photograph hotels, whatever, yachts, houses. You're very, very good at that. But please don't waste your time on anything which is the travel photography I was doing." So that fueled me to even get better at that because that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't get discouraged, but it's yeah, I didn't get encouraging words neither initially. Probably good. I'm fueled by challenges, so
mm,
that probably helped. Um, but yeah, that discovery was fantastic, and I learned to not control anything as well. Right, when you are a foreigner in a land far away from any civilization, you're just by yourself with a few strangers. You hardly speak the well. You don't speak any language in common. You submit to you have to submit. You have to submit and accept that what happened will happen, but it's outside of
mm,
my control. I'm just going to just flow with what's around me. A lot of time I also focused on doing the thing that scares me most, right? So you're deciding between two. I was deciding between two location. Why should I do it? One was like far away, and I was like, that's the one that scares me. That's the one I have to go because that's where I'm
mm,
going to be uncomfortable, and this is where I'm going to learn most. And
mm.
these are the pictures that or the memories as well that I brought back that were the best when you challenge yourself to be in the most uncomfortable position.
There's something freeing in that, though, and I know for me at least, I loved being there. I loved being not knowing the language. I didn't know anything, and I remember the first day I tried to get water, and I didn't understand that it wasn't even the same. And the lady, I went into a store, and the lady was looking at me like, what? And I'm trying to figure it out, and that having to submit to something that is completely out of your control,
Oh
you
yeah,
don't know. And I mean, you probably would have heard some similar things as we do in Australia, that Guatemala is super dangerous and you're going to get abducted and there's cartels everywhere, and
yeah.
you put yourself into that space. But the difference is, I actually knew a couple of people there already, and that was the time that I met you. But the other side of things as well, I was chatting to someone about this week. I don't get a SIM card or anything for my phone when I go over there. And that feeling of no one can contact you, no one
Oh
can
yeah.
sway. You can be whoever and whatever you want to be. It's 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 empowering.
It is the key. I think is to be able to do that when you come back home. If you can bring
Mm,
that same freedom back home, knowing that there's a lot more pressure to be someone or pretend to be someone, that's when you actually master that freedom part. Because
mm,
it's just the fun part is, or the interesting part is, if you go to Guatemala, it's all new, and why can't you just do the same back home? Why don't you have? Because what's the worst that can happen? Are you upset a few people maybe?
yep.
But if the people can't accept you for who you are in your home location, then you probably have the wrong people around you. Why
But
would
then
you want to
there's a
spend?
different side of things. Everyone around you has expectations of who you are. And if you went over there to try and figure out who you are, or you're not sure on that, then it's going to be really tough to maintain that when you get home, because it's still, I mean, it's kind of always a work in progress. And I think it might have been
It
you.
is.
Was it you? You said that the one thing that you're going to notice when you go home, depending on how long you've been away, is that you will have changed massively, but everyone back home will be doing
Exactly
exactly
the same.
the same things, talking about the same things, going to the same places.
Yeah.
That was insane. That was such a jarring moment for me.
But it's not bad neither. If they're happy doing that, it's okay. But some of us are not ready for, well, but some of us, we're not all the same. Some people are not satisfied with that. They hide it because it's scary. It's very scary to admit that you lived your entire life a fake life, a life that is not yours, that was never your choice. And the longer it lasts, the less you want to see it. So you fight it. You have to, because it's a defense mechanism against going into deep depression and hating what you have achieved. Because changing your life is not easy. The other way, neither. Rejecting everything you've done and accepting that, well, actually, you weren't on autopilot for the last, whatever. For me, it was 33 years, complete autopilot. Probably a few more years afterwards, where I was reacting the other way. You're never in control of your life. It's all an illusion. You never had the choice. And when you go back home and yeah, are you still, you see others, you see, now you can see the gap between who you are and who you were.
Mm,
But it still doesn't mean that's you're going in the right direction. You just saw a
mm,
gap. Now you have to actually start peeling the layers of your choices, going back to almost childhood in most cases, to see who's the real, well, in my case, who's the real Matthew. What do I want? What are my real values? What do I really care for? Why do I get insecure? Why do I get angry? Why do I flip on certain people?
mm,
Why am I so loaded in emotion on certain words, right? And you can, once you uncover most of that, you see that you were the product of tons of traumas, and trauma is a big word, but like, it's small traumas are still present in your brain, right? And you're never in control. You're always reactive. You're always
mm,
reactive to someone else's emotion, wording, whatever it is, but you're never free, because you always react one way or another, right? Either fight or move away from it.
mm.
So
But what do you think? What would you say to someone? So there's,
yeah,
have you heard of the region beta paradox? Region beta.
no, I haven't actually.
All right,
Tell
I'm
me.
going to butcher this, but essentially, so things have to get worse for them
Yeah,
to get better. So conversely, a worse situation will get you further along. And I heard this on I think it was a Chris Williamson podcast. So if you had to walk, say, 400 meters, 500 meters, if you had to go that distance, you would walk it because it's just there. But if you had to go, say, 1.5, 2 kilometers, you're probably going to drive it. So inversely, conversely, you're going to get 2 kilometers faster than you would
yeah,
get 400 or 500 meters. And the way it's applied to life, in that the person that's in a relationship that they don't really like, and they're in a job that they don't enjoy, they have been living a life that doesn't fulfill them, but it's not that bad. It's not the end of the world. Those people are not in enough discomfort, in enough pain for them to actually make a change. Whereas if it was just that little bit worse, maybe they hated their job, maybe they hated their partner in their relationship, maybe they were truly miserable rather than very unhappy. It's only when things get worse are they prepared to make a change to get better. So the conversely, inversely, things have to get
true.
worse for them to get better.
But what sort of change are you going to invite? Are you going to want to do a quick fix, or are you going to get a fundamental shift in every, well, in who you are? It's not fundamental, but like, are you going to look
The
back to the
step that you're
root
going to
cause?
take, it's never going to be the correct step. And I heard a saying that said, imperfect action creates momentum and momentum
Mhm.
creates clarity. So I think all that, the region beater, that much worse situation, I think all that does is create some sort of momentum. And I'm sure you can talk about it. The version of me you met 5 years
Yeah.
ago, 6 years ago now, I had momentum in some kind of direction, but I didn't think I'd end up here being this version of myself, who I am, doing what I'm doing, living where I'm living, being this. But I had created a level of momentum when I hit the ejecto button from the corporate life and everything that I
Yeah.
was here. And you did exactly the same. Like, you're not the photographer, you're not a long-haired Yahoo hippie anymore. But that was the necessary momentum for you to get some clarity.
It was. I'm trying to become a better version of myself, and to do that, I have to get lost along the way and have tried different versions of who I am.
Mm,
Um, but there's a facility that I have, which is I don't have the responsibility of a family.
mm,
So the reason I managed to get this journey done in the way I have is also because I was genuinely free, because the only person I had to worry about was me. So it was, in a
mm,
certain way, it's fairly egoistic, but I can see why it is so difficult for people with families, because you suddenly have to think in not only your happiness, but in a larger sense, the family that you've built, the wife, the kids, and everything. I never had
mm.
to do that, so I was able to go a bit deeper in my journeys because of that. Well, a bit deeper, as deep as I wanted, because it affected people around me. But it was my parents, my sister, but it didn't affect my. I didn't have a wife, so it didn't affect my wife or my kids.
I actually
And as a
saw
matter
guys
of
on the other side of that. I sold for a program that was for really successful guys who they'd hit that point.
yeah,
I don't like me. This is not who I want to be. And most of them, the target market was fathers and husbands, and you would see them, they would feel so lost, and they would try and do anything,
yeah,
or the majority would try and do anything for themselves. And it might be, I'm going to go to the gym to make myself feel a bit better so I can show up. And then a lot of these guys would say, my wife would just rip me. Well, I want to be able to go to the gym. I want to be able to do this. Or maybe they would get up early and meditate. And as soon as they get out of bed, like the cold shower, the meditation, which was part of it,
yeah.
as soon as they get out of bed, oh, well, you can go and get the kids ready. You need to do this. You need to do that. Now, I'm not demonizing wives at all. Not at all. Like, a lot of them had really great partners that they had just neglected and pushed away over the years. And a big part of that was, you need to make sure that your partner and your family are on board for you to go through this next 9 to 12 weeks to become a better version of yourself, so you can give back, and you have to clearly communicate it. But these guys trying to do that whilst having a family and, partner, kids, all of these other expectations, it was it was brutal to watch them go through.
It is. It is very brutal, because you're conflicted,
Yeah.
because you want to protect, you want to be there for the family you created, but at the same time, you're not happy in the life you built.
Mm,
And that's the big paradox, which is, do you want to stay in and be a lesser version of yourself, knowing that, how is that one potentially going to inspire your kids? How is your wife going to admire you if you're a smaller version of yourself? But at the
mm,
same time, if the larger version of yourself needs to challenge the entire familyhood, it's scary initially. Long term, it's probably beneficial, but the breaking of the routine and the habits and whatnot is going to scare everyone, because what we want deep down as humans, we want peace. We think we can control it by having
mm,
the bills under control. Like, the food comes, and we're like, we have the planned holidays where everything is safe, right? So we control our peace, but internally, it's the opposite that we need.
mm.
And we can control, honestly, you can't control anything. The moment you
Mm,
accept it, you can't control anything. The only thing you can control is yourself, your emotions. You can try to understand why you why you get triggered, why you react badly with certain people, reacting badly, and like having disrespectful moment or whatever, and where they come from. That's the only thing you can do.
Mm.
Analyzing where it's coming from and getting that under control, and the other thing is always speaking your truth. I think that's the toughest one. Always say your truth, and because that automatically, in a kind way, obviously, but this is going to help create a surrounding where you are with the right people.
Mm.
Because if you surround yourself with the wrong audience, the wrong friends, and everything, you're going to maintain this fake
Mm.
happiness. Speak your truth, and it will be respected, by the way. But
It
it's the
might not
most
be
difficult.
respected by the wrong people, though. And
But they don't have
I
to.
think it's important to distinguish that you're not going to get it right, but it's important to have that radar on of, oh, that person sucks. They are not for the best version of me. They want me to be the version that makes them feel good.
But it's their journey.
Yeah.
And the moment you center it around your journey, it doesn't really matter. They don't like you. Well, it's for now. All you know is
Mm.
they don't like you for now. Maybe they will again in the future. Your door is open. The version of you right now doesn't suit them. That's all. Now they have to
Mm.
choose their own journey. You have to choose yours.
Mm.
But if it's done in a respectful way, and without shouting and offending each other, that's totally fine. You
No.
can part away for a few months, whatever, and come back eventually. But we are all on different journeys and different moments and different speeds and different directions. So it's sometimes a miracle that we meet at the same time in the same interest and the same velocity. But that's where you connect very well with certain people, and then you just disconnect for a while, and you might come back to it. But you only come back to it if you speak your truth and you're honest and you're not scared.
Mm. So I see the life you live now, and it's
Oh, do
lovely.
you?
You've got a really nice, a really really nice place that you live,
Yeah.
and hooking around
Yeah.
Antigua with Chucho, your dog, and everyone. Anywhere you go, someone knows you. You've got to add in an extra 15 to 20 minutes because people are going to stop you and talk to you and everything like that. You have a beautiful life that you've created, really really beautiful, and hearing the other side of this coming from the high pressure, high flying world of banking to throwing all of that away. Now you live in this gorgeous location completely on your terms. So if you were to go back and try and say something to that version of you that was in the banking world, you had one thing that you could say to him
Do
that would
exactly
be,
what you did. Never change anything. I wouldn't
but
change anything.
if we can take that, so amazing.
No,
So
no,
if we
no,
can
no,
take
no.
that and apply it, if that person didn't know what was ahead of them, or you would say to someone else that you see in that same position that's having those
Yeah.
realizations of, "Ooh, I don't know if this is it," what would you say to them?
Trust your instincts. Follow your guts.
Mm.
It's going to get very scary, and it was very scary, and it still sometimes is very scary. But it's the life that I chose. It came with sacrifices, James. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I have an amazing girlfriend, though. But it took me a lot of failed attempts, broken hearts,
Mm.
and having certain people left behind. But I had to make those choices to be for now one of the better version of myself. There's still a lot of work moving forward, but I'm happy with who I am, and I actually beyond that I have no regrets. I have zero regrets. I've made
Mm.
tons of mistakes. I've been I've offended people. I've let people down. But you know what? I think I've learned from all of those.
Mm,
I've learned from it. I've been ashamed, and I grew from it. And I'm constantly trying to be as empathetic as I can be, and I'm not always.
mm,
I yeah, I have yeah, and the thing is, I've managed. The reason I'm here in Guatemala as well is because I'm able to be who I want to be here, and the people accept me exactly on who I am. But here's the thing: when I go back to Europe now and I see my friends and family, I am I'm that same person as well.
mm,
So when I came here initially, I fled Europe. I didn't want to go back, and I didn't go back for a long while. And now when I go back, it's me. I don't have to hide. I don't have to pretend, and it actually works much better. So I
mm.
actually brought that version of me back there. It took me years to be very satisfied as well in Guatemala, right? I was constantly traveling. I was looking as well for another option, potentially in Dubai. You met me when I just came back from Dubai after a little while. I made an attempt there, which was not very, didn't end very well. I have a great memory, but I realized it was not. My year and a half there was very happy, but I I was not the person I would have wanted to be. I had something was off,
Mm.
and I needed to come back to Guatemala and be here. But again, part of another experience that failed, and
You need to test that though. You need to test, am I
I
in the
do.
right spot? Am I doing the
But
right
again,
thing?
I'm very conscious. Oh, sorry, I do.
No, no, that's
But
that,
the downside is I know that I disappointed a few people down
it's
there,
gonna happen.
and it's gonna happen. But it's I'm very conscious of that as well. That my choices and my happiness sometimes came at the price of others, right? And hurting others. So I'm very conscious how lucky I am to have this life, and that it was not. I'm not a monk, and that it
Mm.
came at the expense of some other people's tears. And I'm sorry, but I can't put myself second because I know what happens when I do that. I can blend in for a while. I can do that. I can pretend for a while, but I'm not going to be fulfilled, and it's not going to help me.
I had that very, very recently, as in the past couple of months, and um, I so it was put to me by a friend of mine, Josh, very, very clever guy, and he said sometimes the world is going to throw you tests. And
Mm.
I'm not a massive believer in the universe style of thinking, but he said sometimes the universe is going to throw you tests, and it's going to see whether or not you're on the right path. Are you doing the right things? If I hang this carrot in front of you, are you going to run off on a completely different path? And I saw an opportunity, and it was with people that I liked, and I followed that path for a few months, and ultimately it did steer me away from what I'm doing, what I'm good at, and it just felt so incongruent. I felt these walls start to close in because everything that I've set up is to do what I want to do with who I want to do when I want to, and I don't want to have to do things that I don't enjoy. And I think that goes against everything that people socially accept. And they say sometimes no, you actually don't. You don't. And I just felt these walls closing in, but I felt responsible to them, the guys that I was working with, to follow through. And I just kept having these conversations, especially with Marley, and it was just, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I don't I don't like how it feels. Uh, it's not congruent with me, and then I spoke to a few people about it, and at the end of the day, it was, this is not me. This is not what I need to be doing, and I didn't do all of this work to be slotted back into, square peg, round hole again. And as soon as I made that decision of, no, this is not what I want to do. And it was a great conversation. They're really good guys. And it was, hey, this is not working. You can't give me what I need. And I'm not prepared or able to give you what you need. And as soon as I made that decision of, this is not the path that I'm going to follow, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and amplify it, so much weight came off my shoulders. But the problem is, the only reason I could make that decision was I knew who I was, what I was about, what I wanted to do, so I could be clear of that's taking me further away from that. And I think you can't live life being so afraid of offending anyone else.
No,
Because the
but you
only
want to
person
be
you
mindful.
truly hurt is yourself.
Yeah, but you want to be mindful. Sorry, there was a delay there. But you want to be mindful that sometimes you meet and you're almost at the same time, at the same journey, but you might find out that we go into two different ways. So you have, and then you have to part away and understand that, well, it's not working right now. But I have a lot of nostalgia. I don't know why. I haven't found out, but I love the past. I always loved the past. And I don't know. But I naturally don't like to hurt people. That's the problem. I naturally don't like to hurt people. I know I can, and I know I have as well. And I know that right now, for example, I'm not perfectly balanced. I'm a bit off too. I'm not in my balance. I lost a little bit of flow. Maybe overworked, whatnot. I have to recenter myself again. But
and I don't think that ends though. We always
no, it never ends.
We always go through that cycle. And there's a couple of songs that I listen to that they always just kind of snap it back in. And there's one, everyone knows it. It's called "The Good Old Days" by Macklemore, and it basically says, these are the good old days. Right now, the life you're living at this time, this is the good old days. But there's also another one that I found, and not the typical kind of song I would listen to, but I like the premise. And it says, I think, what's it called? I miss the future, or something like that. And it basically talks about, I miss all of the things that I'm going to do with the people that I'm going to do it with, going to the movies, going to the beach, like going to all of these really fun things. I miss the future, but instead I'm sitting here watching Netflix on my computer. And it's such a, just when that line kicks in, it's just right. Like right now, these are the good old days. These are the things that we're doing. But instead of living that life, we're thinking about either how good things used to be or just wasting our time doing things that we don't really need to do or that don't add value.
Because distractions are big nowadays. Very, very, like with the phones and everything, we can get instantly distracted. Some of it is completely unconscious. So again, it's very important to stay conscious and see what is important, what matters to you. What is the version you want to become, right? And find out if you.
What is that version you want to become? And I think people get so worried about 10 iterations forward of what they have to do now to become that person, then they don't think, well, how do I become the next better version of myself?
Yeah. I would want to be a more caring, more empathetic, more loving person, and I fail to that sometimes, but
that's part of learning.
I'm not there. I know, but it's I'm not always there. No.
No, we're never there. We're never always there. And I was having this conversation with someone actually this morning, in that the only real time you fail is if you can make mistakes, but failure is an opportunity. In that, what did I do? Why didn't it work? What do I not want to do in the future? And what can I take from it?
Yep. I know I want to go back eventually to photography. For example, I know that. I know that chapter of my life just closed and will be reopened. And I did again. I rushed into a few things. The banking thing started all over again. So if you're rushing, going fast through objectives, and then when I reached those objectives, I was like, "What the heck? What happened now?" And yeah, so I'm still missing something that to have potentially the last part of my life, or the next one, which is the deeper meaning. I know that I felt the freest I've ever felt was always in Southeast Asia, in the temples, in the Buddhist temples. That was just, I don't know, that was the most magical places I've ever been, where I really genuinely felt completely at peace, calm. And it reflected because every time I just flew back via Dubai to here or wherever, I was lost every time I landed in Dubai. Completely lost. Energy wise, like completely lost. It took me time to readjust each time. I'm looking forward to finding a bit of a balance again in my life. And the sales world can be quite brutal in that, right? You just, because you get rejected nonstop, even if you mean well, it's like it's creating the connection, the trust, and everything. Can throw a lot of us, and it's a very solitary world. I don't know about you, but I spend most of my days alone here with my dogs, right? And
Yeah.
okay, I meet people on Zoom, but the thing I had when I was in the banking world is I had colleagues right next to me all the time. So you
Oh,
had a
look,
bad moment,
remote
you grab.
sales is definitely not 600 people on a floor together. It's exactly the same thing for me every day. Just me and the dogs, and you do speak to people all day, but you don't really interact
No,
that
no.
much.
And I
You're very
and I miss the human interaction, the
mm.
handshakes, that part of it. Um,
I actually had
but
a
also
salesman in
the
my
human
house
connection.
yesterday, and I realized how much I do miss that face to face sales
Yeah.
interaction. He was not great. He was a nice guy, terrible salesman, and I'm going to get a really good deal.
Yeah.
Uh, but I miss that face to face, that
Yeah.
actually reading that person, what they're saying, what they're thinking, how they react to you, as opposed to what's going on through a screen. And I
Yeah.
mean, we haven't really spoken about sales too much in this, but again, it's a bit of it's a mechanism, isn't it? So you can live life however you want to live it, wherever you want to live it with remote sales, but there is always the opportunity cost.
No, there's. But you know what for me is the most amazing on the sales process? Is it and sales in general, everything I've learned about psychology or over like the Jungian studies and all that, everything I've learned on myself, you can apply any of this in our sales and negotiations. All of
Mm,
this is applicable. How our shadows, unconscious sides drive you and trigger you when you get triggered. You see yourself getting triggered on the sales call. I don't know if you're like. There's been a lot of talks of like how to handle these tough prospects and alpha and whatnot. The real only challenge you have to do there is not getting triggered. The reason a sales guy is getting triggered is the reason he doesn't move the sale in any sort of direction, because his ego is getting in his way. Has nothing to do with the prospect. You're the one getting triggered, right? And if you don't uncover that, if you don't know how to handle that, if you don't know how to again become a better version of yourself, which is like understanding if a prospect comes in a different shape than you want him to be, that's okay. There's
mm,
nothing wrong with that. You just have to handle it. You just have to
mm,
handle your emotion, not his.
mm,
We don't handle our emotions very well. We're still very
mm.
instinctive. So I've
But
learned
then you
that
see
all of
people
this.
lose sales because they react according to things that are their insecurities,
Yeah, of course.
the things that they struggle with.
Yeah,
And I think unless you come to terms with everything that we've spoken about in this podcast, you will always be at the mercy of that.
of course. And hence why ultimately the self-discovery or self-exploratory journey is the most important one.
Mm,
The more you know about yourself, the more you're going to understand others as well. Potentially, start being able to put yourself in their shoes and their understanding and in their
mm,
world. and become empathetic. You were saying like you go back home and people haven't changed and you have. It doesn't mean anything really. It just means you found a different journey. It doesn't mean they're worse off than you or better or whatnot. And it also means you make them feel insecure because you're showing them something that they can't attain. So you become a threat. And the way you transmit that back to them, which is the way you present it, your new version, can make a difference between someone feeling rejected or feeling accepted in the new version of you, right? So here again, the way you come back home after a long trip or whatever, and you see your friends that haven't changed and you communicate with them will impact massively how this relationship might go, because you might come back going like, I'm a better version of myself. Who are you?
Mm,
What is that going to do to them? They're going to feel rejected.
mm. Yeah. I think that's it's a lot more of the realization of how much things have changed, as opposed to
Yeah.
imposing that on
But
someone
how are you
else.
getting triggered? How are
Mm,
you getting triggered? By going back home and actually seeing everything is just hasn't changed. So it triggers something in you, right?
mm,
Rebellious, makes you feel maybe better about yourself. But there's a version of you that is like wants to shine and dominate and feel important. And that new version of you makes you feel much more important than the old version of your friends or whatever it is, right?
Well,
I've seen
that's one way, but it could be that you kind of have a realization that there's still a lot more work to do.
there's
Still a lot more to do.
next answer, there's the next question, there's the next question. There's always, yeah, there's always.
There's always more
It
questions.
never it's never going to stop. It's going to stop the day we die potentially. And then you want to be able to say, I've lived the life, or I lived my life to the fullest. I didn't leave anything behind.
Mm,
That I could have done that I didn't do. But that's what I want. That's not what everybody wants. A lot of people want, well, and I don't know, their version of this. Can be
mm.
financial security, can be whatever it is.
I see
I,
this
I,
happen a lot more. And so I'll ask you one more question, then we'll probably wrap up.
yeah,
So I
sure.
see this happen a lot more, particularly in sales guys, and I speak to guys earlier in their career, early 20s, mid 20s, and they are hustle,
Yeah.
grind. Let's take as many calls as we possibly can, and objection handling, and like objection wars, and all of this sort of stuff. And I never judge them because that reminds me of a past version of myself. I remember that was such an exciting time. Like you're in the team, like you're working nonstop. You just want to get those deals across the line, and you don't really care how it happens. And then I see a lot of people, they hit that point of um, this is not really how I want to be. This
No?
is not how I want things to be. And a lot of people, when they're not ready to have that conversation, and you see it a lot, particularly in content and people starting to get a little bit of notoriety, they haven't hit that point yet. And they're very quick to dismiss it. And
No?
then you have a choice. Do you go back at them and say, well, this? And I take the path of they will understand at one point. And I don't judge them because that was honestly a past version of myself. So if you were in that position of feeling as though, hey, this is not how I want to be, this is not how I want to go, any parting words of wisdom that you could give, what would that be?
Wow. Okay. You're not. What would it be? Interesting. Interesting. I'm not sure, James. There is not one way to sell. There is not one best way. There's the best way for for the moment you are in. So explore something different, try it out, see if you like it a bit more. But there's not one correct way of selling.
There's no.
See what works for you at the moment you're at. satisfy your ego, enjoy the calls, enjoy the hustling and objection handling and overcoming, and enjoy that at the beginning. It's going to make you feel important. It's going to make you feel strong. And it's something that you need, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't do that and you wouldn't enjoy it. It requires a lot of energy that you probably have, but this is going to fade ultimately.
Yeah.
And when you're ready and when you feel, "Phew, this is exhausting, this is not fulfilling," this is where you have to just look at yourself and go like, what would the next better version of me selling look like?
Yeah.
But everything has a time and space, and if you need to sell that way initially, okay, do it. Just be conscious that, and indeed, on the other side, there's another person receiving on the receiving end, right? And it's fun for you. You using your superpower and super energy at the beginning for in a certain direction that affects others. Be conscious of what it actually does on the other side, right? Are you really transforming other people's life, or are you telling yourself you are helping them really? Right? Because it's more helpful to actually view your excess energy and objection handling battle as a positive, because you're transforming someone's life, but you're not empowering that person on the other side. It might not have been their decision. So just be very conscious of it, very open, very accept that it might be a mistake, it might be not, whatever you're at, and then seek the better solutions. There's a time and place for everything, but there's a reason why everybody hates salespeople, right? It's just because we don't evolve from that stage.
Yeah.
Oh, very few do actually.
Yeah. That's a good little nugget. So, perfect spot to wrap up. Thanks for coming on. We covered a
One
heap
hour
of stuff
30
that's
for a
not
nugget.
necessarily not necessarily all perfectly sales related, but I think a very necessary kind of angle and an approach to a conversation. So, thanks for coming on, and I'm sure it won't
Of
be the
course.
last.
No, I hope no. We can do more specific subjects. It's very broad, so I hope it won't bore anybody. But like, um, yeah, just honestly, if you enjoy human connections and human communication, sales is a great environment to be, obviously. And then the more you learn about yourself, the more you're going to just become better at this, and you're going to enjoy it as well. At one stage, it's going to be fun. It's going to be enjoyable. It's not going to be a battle. It's going to be enjoyable, and then you won't need as much force to get to the outcome that you want.
We'll get more specific on another one.
On another one, let's do that.
Amazing. Perfect. Good to have you on.
Thanks. Thanks, Jen.